Hey, what's up everybody? Sean and Lanette Reed here, and today we're going to give you 3 tips on how to be patient with your spouse. But before we get into that, make sure you click the like and subscribe button.
Patience ultimately is self-restraint. More specifically, it's restraining yourself from imposing your will on somebody else for whatever reason.
Oh, that's deep.
It is deep.
Wow.
So when your spouse is getting on your nerves and you believe that they are the cause for whatever may be a problem, and they're not quite getting it, they're not getting the hints, they're not getting the shouts, and you really want them to get it together, then patience becomes that moment where you choose to say, before I, strangle this person.
Proceed to strangle them.
Right? I'm going to restrain myself instead of me forcing them to come up to what my will is for them at that time. So Lanette, what does patience look like in action then?
Well, I would have to say when they just can't get right and you've told them over and over, patience is actually giving them the time and the space to get right. And it's actually serving them while they're still getting right.
Oh, that's tough right there.
They may be trying their best, and to you think their best just ain't good enough. But they're trying, and so you have to give them the space for them to be able to get it right.
So the truth is, whenever you have a relational setback, it can really be frustrating because you can become deflated where you've been what in your mind may be patient long enough. And the question really is,
what is long enough?
Yeah, what is long enough? Like you've been praying, you've been hoping, you've been talking to them, and they just don't seem to get it. And honestly, just being real, it can get discouraging. You can get angry. It can be really frustrating when a person isn't coming up to that level of being on the same page with what it is that you're asking from them. And so we're going to give you 3 tips. And so get ready. Tip number 1, target your trigger.
Ooh. Okay. So even though I'm trying to be patient with them, I need to target my trigger?
Yeah, what you're trying to find out is what's setting you off. What is it? Because you want to make sure, number 1, that it's actually something that they are doing. It may be just a personal issue. I'll speak for myself. I've had times where my wife externally was the person I was blaming for something that I actually personally needed to walk through and deal with on my own. And so regardless to if she were to change her behavior, stop doing something that was irritating me, something that was a pet peeve or whatever, even if she would have stopped it, personally, I was going to find something else to be nitpicky about because I had something that was a trigger within me that wasn't just about my marriage, it was about me as a man. And so you have to really process, is this something, is it, and one of the ways you can do this is, I was going crazy in traffic. If somebody cut me off in traffic, I was about to snap and go off and cuss folk out. And then, you know what I mean? And then at the same time, if one of the kids would do something and it really bothered me, I noticed my temper was getting really intense when it was coming to my kids. And so even though my wife may have done something in that moment, I had a trigger that was not only being set off by her, but it was my kids and it was traffic. So if everybody in the world is bothering you, then the problem is really you in that moment. And so if you're not in that category where the trigger is not just kind of a universal issue that you're having, and let's just say your spouse is doing something that's wrong or something that you feel should change, then you want to actually say, okay, what is that specific thing so that you can deal with tip number 2.
Talk about the right things at the right time. And so just because you have a pressing matter or it's heavy on your heart doesn't necessarily mean that you got to say it right then, right there at that very moment. There is a right time and there is a wrong time. And usually the wrong time is when we try to have these discussions. Immediately after work, while the kids are running around, while you're trying to get things ready for the next day or be prepared to, y'all get ready to leave or even on your way to church, is not the right time to have these types of discussions. And so I know for me, this takes a little bit of learning your spouse, but I know for me, it's not good to have an urgent conversation with Sean, as he's sitting down reading a book. He loves to read. I know that's one of his top strengths is to learn. And so when he's in that mode of just learning and he's all in and he's focused on one thing, that's not the time for me to say, hey Sean, there's something I want to talk about.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, as you learn your spouse, you have to have a little bit of hope in there that what you're talking about is something that can be worked out within their character or their behavior, their attitude. If it's worth it enough, you've done tip number one, you've processed it, and it's worth it enough for you. It's not something that you could just say, I'm gonna just let that slide. Yeah. They tripped this one time, but it's not a reoccurring issue, and you just kind of forgive it and move on. But if it's something that's like reoccurring, is really bothering you, and it's worth bringing up, then it's worth setting the right atmosphere to discuss it.
I think sometimes we wait too long to have these conversations, really, and so it's almost like a teapot, where you can hear it before it starts, screaming. Yeah. But we wait until it's been screaming for like 5 minutes. So if there is a reoccurring action that keeps taking place, then after the third or fourth time, or after you say, hey babe, when you did that,
this is how it made me feel.
How it feels. After you've had those types of discussion and it keeps going, then we really need to sit down and have a heart-to-heart.
Yeah, and something to what she just said right there that I think is really important. You shouldn't, if it's worth it and it's something that's really bringing you pain or frustration, and it's not just a personal trigger, then it shouldn't be like a year or two before you discuss it. Like, that shouldn't happen. This is something that needs to be dealt with sooner than later. But you also don't want to be a person that's constantly criticizing, complaining, berating, belittling your spouse, because then at that point they're married to somebody who's just nitpicky about every flaw that they see.
Some stuff should just roll off.
Yeah, they're not perfect, and so you shouldn't treat them like they should be. There has to be love and grace, but at the same time, there are some things that do need to change within relationships, and you should feel free to discuss it. All right, so tip number 3 is to trust God to control the things you can't. Trust God to control the things you can't. Now, if you're a person of faith and you have been praying for your spouse, when you put them in God's hands, don't take them back and put them in your hands. He
preached a word a long time ago called "Don't be a taker-backer."
Yes, yeah. And ultimately, if you cast the care to God, then give it to him. Don't take it back, right? Don't be a taker-backer. I remember that. And so the heart behind this is God could be working behind the scenes to answer a prayer you've prayed regarding your spouse, but he may be taking them on a journey to get it out of them. And you may get in the way of that by how you're constantly inserting yourself in their growth and their development. And so you have to be really careful not to rush a person's transformation, because some things aren't just a matter of, oh, I'm just making a bad choice. You know good and well that there's some areas in your life where you struggle to overcome, and it takes time, and God has to do a work in your heart and to renew your mind.
Yeah, and what may seem like an easy fix for you may be an area of growth and maturity and development for them.
Yes. So take your time. Be patient. The Bible says it like this: faith works patience, experience hope. The Bible also tells us to count it all joy when you're going through difficult times, knowing that the trying of your faith works patience. And so there is this thing where patience is not just idly just sitting there wishing, but patience is, I'm doing something while I'm waiting on God. The doing something is loving, forgiving, being merciful, being compassionate, serving while you're waiting on them to get better. It doesn't help if they're already in a struggle